Let's move on very quickly. It's the 24 hours to the 365 days of Lamido Sanusi's first year in office. He formally took over from Professor Chukwuma Soludo on the 4th of June 2009. So it's been 12 months since Lamido's been in the saddle, just like yesterday. So let's continue this series we started on Monday, the 31st of May, looking at the reform agenda of Lamido Sanusi, his policies, milestones and achievements. We'll try to do this in retrospect. A part of what the central bank announced over the past few months is that it's going into the second phase of its reforms. And this second phase will be guided by 4 pillars. Just as you see now on your TV screen. The strengthening of the quality of commercial banks in Nigeria. The second pillar is the enabling healthy financial sector and ensuring the stability of the entire financial system. But the overriding factor of pillar will be the contributions of the financial system to the real economy. So let's get some insight into what these pillars actually mean and how will they be achieved moving forward, looking backward over the past 12 months, as it were. Dr. Olushola Dada is joining us here, the immediate past president of the Institute of Directors and the chairman of Ankoria Investment and Securities, a member of the Nigerian Stock Exchange. Good morning, Doctor.
Good morning.
Thank you very much
for
coming in here this morning. At various times you served on the board of banks yourself as a director in those days when we had about 120 banks in Nigeria, and you also manage a brokerage firm. So on both sides you've dealt with both the banking sector, as it were. You've seen not more than 1, 2, 3, 4 or 5 central bank governors come and go. Looking back at what the last 12 months had been Lamido's in office, give us a quick summary of what you think his actions, his pronouncements had been.
Well, thank you very much. The coming into the scene of Soludo Lamido has actually brought sanity into the financial system in Nigeria. It's only a man that is very brave that could do what Lamido has done, because when you look at the system under Soludo, and you look at the system, I mean, the 1 year that Lamido has occupied the seat, you find out that if not for him, possibly Nigeria could have been a totally failed economy. What do I mean by that? In a situation where it was discovered that many banks are grossly, they were insolvent. They don't even have in the banking industry, you find banks trying to take money overnight in order to cover their where they have some shortfalls and all the rest of that, in order to pay depositors and everything like that. So you now find that banks were finding it difficult to do that among themselves. At a point in time, it was discovered that some banks were giving a very, very fraudulent and wrong impression of their status, of their position, financial position, and so the worst part of it is a situation where there's a total lack of corporate governance in the financial system, and you find that directors of banks, both executive and non-executives, they were heavily indebted to their banks. This is totally against the principle of banking. And you have seen situations where they are talking of billions of naira taken by some bank executives or even non-executives from their banks without collateral. In the first instance, banks, I mean, directors in this situation should not even borrow from their own banks. If they want to borrow, they could go to other banks to borrow. But situation became so irresponsible on the part of many of the directors. And they were even laundering money in a very senseless manner, taking money from their banks, taking it overseas, and all the rest of it. And when Sanusi came into the office, I mean, he looked at this thing, and he sacked many of the directors that were involved in these acts. He dealt with even the banks that were involved in these activities, to the extent that he had to remove chief executives and executive directors of banks and appointed new ones to manage those banks for a short period. I think this is 1 year now. We feel that you have to do something about either renew their tenure or allow the boards of the banks to now choose their own directors, both executive and non-executive.
Let's tap from your experience of how distress resolutions had always been handled in Nigeria. We'll get back to those 4 pillars of new banking reforms, of the second phase, as it were. But let's get the background properly sorted out, as it were. Distress resolution in the banking industry hitherto had always been a central bank NDIC affair. In other words, the NDIC, as the undertaker, as it were, had always been the sister organization of the central bank. Almost always, when there are distress solutions, the NDIC moving first. We saw it to Spring Bank. It happened in Citizens International. It happened in Savannah Bank. This time around, the central bank, Lamido, decided not to involve the NDIC, not to liquidate any of these banks, not to send in NDIC team as an interim managers of these institutions, but chose individuals on the merits of private individuals who are ex-bankers like yourself to manage these institutions. Would you say this distress resolution option that had never been used before in the banking history of Nigeria was quite appropriate by Lamido?
Well, I would say it is quite appropriate. You know, there was a sequence. When Lamido came into office, he set up a special examination to look into all the banks. And it's different from the routine examination that used to be done by both the NDIC and the central bank. Special examination is allowed under the provisions of the act that set up the central bank. So Lamido chose to use that approach. Instead of saying, okay, we have found this bank in distress, therefore, say, NDIC, go into it, look at it properly, declare the bank to be in distress, and possibly liquidate it. You see, in such a situation, it is the depositors and other stakeholders that suffer. But the approach of Lamido is more realistic. He didn't want to get the depositors and other stakeholders in the banks, including the shareholders, to suffer. He now say, okay, we look into this bank, this is the situation. How much will be needed to salvage these banks? Then he appealed to the federal government. He went to late President Yaradua that I will need X billion naira, I think about 600 billion, to bail out the banks that we had observed they were distressed. But in order for the money not to go down the drain, I will sack all the people managing those banks, because I cannot give them the money I'm taking from federal government, which is public money, into those banks. To the
same set of people.
To the same set of people. So enough to clear those people. Then eject that money. And it's not a gift to that bank. He said the new managers should manage those banks to a level in which they should be able to repay the money given by the by the federal government. And that was the approach in many parts of the world, in UK, in America. I mean, in America, they call it a different name, bailout strategy, and so also even in UK. So it's a bailout strategy on the part of central bank, using taxpayers' money to do the bailout. But in order not to allow taxpayers' money to go down the drain, and in expectation that that money provided by federal government, which is taxpayers' money, will be paid back to the federal government when the bank is retrieved and they are in good position and they are doing very well.
Looking at what has happened in the last 12 months, you think it is time for the central bank to move into the second phase of these reforms?
Of what?
Of the reform.
Reform. Yes, yes. You see, some people were crying. They were condemning Lamido that it's too rash, it's too emotional about what he's doing, not having the consideration for the people, even that have been sacked, or the way he has been dealing with the banks, the remaining banks that are doing very well. You see, the most important thing is that what the second stage of reform that Lamido is trying to work towards, which I think is the question of issue of risk management, because the problem that faced most of the banks before this first reform, the issue of risk management, you find out that many of the banks, they didn't manage their risk very well. They find out that, I mean, they are granting credits to fund users without even realizing whether the people they are granting the credit to, they will be able to pay back. And that's why you have many on paid back credits granted to customers. In fact, like I mentioned earlier on, even some of the credits granted, they were granted to the friends of the directors and to themselves too. There are no proper analysis of the credits that's been granted. So the next stage of reform should be, how do we prevent another set of risk and another set of distress coming up again? And in fact, the way the central bank is going about it now, they are trying to ensure that banks manage their credits very well. And that's why you find out that they are directing banks now, central bank is directing banks, that the direction of credit should be in favor of the real sector of the economy, rather than to go into service sector or to people who will borrow the money, change it into foreign currency, carry it abroad to go and buy Rolls Royce and all the rest of it over there, not contributing to the economy. So the next set should be a situation in which banks, the banking industry in Nigeria, should be what I would call an organization, I mean an industry that will help in the growth of the Nigerian economy. And that's what they are supposed to do.
Okay, will you give us a few more minutes, Dr. Olusola? We'll give us a few more minutes. We'll come back to you in the second part of the discussion with you. We're going to tap your experience this time from the other side of the street, which is a capital market. In other words, the actions of Lamido over the past 12 months, first in the banking sector as the direct center of the crisis, as it were, but the tentacles were already in the pension fund market, in insurance, in brokerage firms, in capital market, in other areas, in the real estate market, oil and gas, and other and such. So we're going to look at this very critical, important. You raised the point that yes, we should get banks to do business for the real economy, and those were the words of Chukwuma Soludo as well when he was doing the banking consolidation. I'm sure you remember that in 2004, 2005, that the banking sector should be consolidated. It should be big, strong, and reliable to be able to help the domestic economy. What happened within those few years? Why didn't do that? Will we be able to get these same banking institutions to do that same objective moving forward in the second phase of this banking reform now under Lamido Sanusi? Just stick around, we'll be back to you. You're watching Business Morning Wednesday.